Balancing out the mind, body, and spirit on today's Oblyron Spirituality. Greetings, everyone. I am Oblyron, Lord of the Underworld and Magister of the Cube. Thank you for joining me on today's episode, where we're going to talk about how to not only balance out our mind, body, and spirit, but also when these aspects begin to become out of balance within us. Now, why is it that the big three keep on coming back up? Why do we always hear mind, body, spirit, mind, body, spirit? Why is it that no matter whatever spiritual practice we get into, we always seem to see these repeated patterns and these sort of repeated mnemonics of either 3s, 7s, 4s, so on and so forth. And it always seems, again, like I was saying earlier, that the mind, body, and spirit always come around to remind us of what we need to do to live out our highest and best lives. So today we're going to dive into a little bit of each of these topics. This is a spiritual channel, so I'm going to start off with the spirit first of all. So what happens when we balance out our spirit in the mind, body, and spirit trifecta? Well, to have a spiritual component to our lives is one of the most liberating and wonderful aspects to our lives. It helps us to detach from the more mundane aspects of our lives. It helps us to detach from the world of paying bills and, what is the bottom line with our checking account and whatnot. It helps us to give us that spark of hope in the future, that things can improve, that things are not necessarily as they seem, that the elements of the spirit also help us to be able to read in between the lines of a lot of things too. Again, to be able to detach, to be able to use our intuition and to see things which maybe not everyone can see. It helps us to expand our vision. It helps us to expand our sight, our abilities to look into the future and to hopefully look into the future with a little bit of comfort. The knowledge of the spirit adds a certain layer that I think goes beyond just, let's say, typical imagination. Anyone who has gone down the path of spirituality, anyone knows that when you begin to open yourself up to a lot of these channels, it's not just about coincidence. It's not just about these random things which sort of happen to us. We begin to see patterns in almost these sort of unrelated, nonsensical events. And yet somehow with the guidance of spirit, we're able to see a lot of these things and we're able to read in between the lines. So spirit is a wonderful tool to strengthen our intuition. Spirit is a wonderful tool to strengthen our premonition, to have that sort of spidey sense, that sense of, to be able to tell when there's danger ahead. And of course, when we are really on a roll and we start to have those synchronicities, we start to see the spirit animals, we start to see signs everywhere, almost on a daily basis or several times a day or many times a day. And as we begin to tap into these energies, again, it gives us a sense of awareness and understanding, which is not something that you can necessarily buy from books. It's not something that you can necessarily get from even, let's say, going to church or from getting a degree. It's just something that we know within us. It's that faith within us. So what is the downside to spirit? Well, the greatest downside, especially when our spirit becomes out of balance, is we have a tendency to become a little bit too self-righteous, and we have a tendency to become a little too dogmatic. I've talked about this in several episodes before, in that even for myself, I've had multiple experiences with the Goetia, with Hecate, with all these sort of underworld beings, and yet there is a part of me that says, okay, at any point you have to be prepared that this is just all in your mind, that when we pass on, we are essentially, our body essentially breaks down and it becomes resources for bacteria, for other lives which feed off of decaying flesh and all of that. And I think that's always good to have in your back pocket, because when we don't have that in our back pocket, it's very easy to sort of spin out of control. It's very easy to again be very dogmatic, to become very self-righteous. I mean, how many times, within our lifetimes have we been told by, let's say, very enthusiastic evangelical Jesus lovers that, if you don't accept Christ into your heart, that, you're going to go straight to hell. I mean, I know I've been told that many times in my life, especially since starting this spiritual channel. But also at the same time, how can you be so sure of yourself? And again, this is coming from a person in my own personal experience. I have had a lot of spiritual experiences. In fact, my life is a spiritual experience. But again, also at the same time, you have to be willing to let it go. You have to be willing to just drop it all at a moment's notice, because that is also the time when we begin to become a little bit too set in our ways. Again, what is spirituality? It's meant for us to be able to expand who we are. It's the ability to be able to also live our lives as better human beings. So when we begin to go down the path of self-righteousness, of dogma, that's a real slippery slope. And how many crusades have been fought in the name of religion? How many people have died in the names of certain deities and suffered at the hands of certain deities because, that was a people's belief system that they imposed on others. And unfortunately, the number is very high throughout human history. So, again, spirit is a wonderful tool to be able to expand our horizons, to be able to expand our intuition, but we cannot allow ourselves to become trapped in dogma and self-righteousness. That should be the red flag of when our spiritualism is starting to go out of balance, when we become a little bit too self-assured, when we become a little bit too high and mighty in our belief systems and our opinions. And again, it's not something that just translates into spirituality, but I've noticed in people that do take on these attitudes, it sort of translates into every aspect of their lives. So again, always keep spiritualism in balance. Always keep it with a healthy grain of salt. All of our belief systems. And as long as we keep that in mind, then we always know that we're constantly learning, we're constantly growing. And really that's the main in my opinion, it's the main goal of spirituality, is to always keep us growing, is to always keep our spirit expanding, our intuition expanding, our awareness expanding and growing. Not necessarily to get too wrapped up in the rituals and the patterns and dogma and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's move on to the mind now. Now, our minds are wonderful tools for rationalism, for logic, for algorithms, for determining and predicting measured results. On a very basic level, we know, okay, if I cut myself, that will hurt. So in the future, I will do everything to not cut myself so that I won't get hurt. That's an implementation of the mind. The mind teaches us many wonderful lessons about how to operate in this plane of existence, in this reality. The mind allows us to be able to, especially when it's applied properly, it can also help us to curtail, let's say, less than desirable outcomes in the future. Let's say, for example, if we have bad spending habits, well, guess what? If we have the ability to actually track and analyze what our spending habits are, then we have the ability to curtail that discomfort in the future when, let's say, when we run out of money or we need to borrow money because of our bad spending habits. Happens with a lot of people. And all of these are essentially tools of the mind. The mind teaches us taxes, it teaches us mathematics, it teaches us rationalism and being able to really get to the heart of the matter by asking very analytical and focused questions. These are all aspects of the mind. And a lot of times when combined with spirituality, the combination of both the mind and the spirit is a very powerful combination, because you have, let's say, the intuition of the spirit, which helps to guide and lead the rationalism of the mind. People who have the ability to do that go far in pretty much any subject that they do. And it really doesn't matter what subject it is. Even Einstein had an almost spiritual component to a lot of the ways in which he approached his own theorems. And in fact, a lot of it, you can say, his abilities to come up with all these formulas and to be able to come up with these new ways of looking at physics was primarily inspired by his spiritual beliefs. It was primarily fueled by his belief in a higher power, and that there was something more to what we just see. And yes, it's important to have both. I find that when you have one without the other, it can lead us down a path it can lead us down a path to where we begin to lose credibility. It can also lead us down a path to where we become a bit too obtuse also in how we view things. And this is why it's also very important to balance out the spiritualism with the mind, and the mind with the spiritualism. We all know those people who are, let's say, a little bit too rational for their own good. And when people become too rational, when they have a tendency to go into non-action, because they have the ability to rationalize every decision into nothingness, apparently. We all know those people, highly intelligent people, but they will never take chances. They're just not risk takers. They're not types of people who will branch out, so to speak. And that's what happens when we are too driven by our logic and we are not driven enough by our spirit, is that we basically become kind of like this automaton. We become another cog in the machine. And people who are very endowed with the mind, they become excellent cogs in the machine. But nonetheless, it's kind of the fate of many people like that. Likewise, if you were to go on the other end of the spectrum, where let's say people have far more spiritual awareness than they do with the awareness of rationalism, well, that also poses its own problems. For example, I read this book by this one Russian psychic, and she was wonderful, actually. She had a whole creation story that had to deal with flowers and trees, and it was a great read. And I could tell that a lot of the information was channeled, and that's fine. But where she lost a lot of the credibility with me was when she started talking about astronomical events. And for me, when I took astronomy in college, I actually really enjoyed the class. So I'm a real big astronomy buff. And when she started talking about astronomy, I could tell that she didn't have a background or that she didn't study in it in any way, shape, or form, because she's talking about the ways that heavenly bodies move, and they absolutely do not move in the ways that she was describing. So, again, even though we may be channeling messages, we may be receiving these things, if we are going to start quoting things that have to deal with science or things which have to deal more with rationalism, we should really do our homework when we decide to incorporate those types of things into our spiritual practices. Because if you're incorporating something like astronomy into a spiritual practice, but you're not even giving the subject its proper due diligence, well, then what is your spiritual belief based on? It's pretty much based off of a fantasy. And of course, many people would argue, well, spiritual beliefs in general are probably just all fantasies, and maybe they are. But again, if we are going to start quoting the sciences, we should make sure it all lines up. So yeah, that's what happens when we dive a little bit too much into the spirit and probably not enough into the mind. And again, as I've also stated, when we dive too much into the mind and not enough into spirit, then we also have the ability to become a bit more obtuse. We become a little bit too grounded. We begin to think that the world of paying bills and in the world of what we see is what we get, we have a tendency to think that is the end all be all. And there is more to it. But again, everything within balance. We don't want to blast off into the stratosphere without knowing the concepts of how to blast off into the stratosphere. We don't want to get lost in space, so to speak. And as I've said in videos before, I've done that too at the beginning of my spiritual experience. Man, those Kundalini activations can be very powerful, and it can really throw off our sense of self and really throw off even our sense of reality. Okay, so let's move on to the body. Now, the body, we may have a tendency to ignore the importance of the body in our spiritual and our mental development. It almost seems like many people, when we kind of go down these academic pursuits or these spiritual pursuits, many of us, we have a tendency to let our bodies go. And it's because, most of the times when we're working these jobs, when we are, involved in our studies, when we are so, we either have our noses in books, or we either have our heads in the clouds through meditation, it's very easy to neglect the body. But when you look at mind, body, and spirit, the body is 33% of what you are, much in the way that our credit scores are equal parts of debt to income ratio, credit applications, so on and so forth. The body is 33% of that equation. And when we begin to neglect that body, we also begin to, in my opinion, we begin to lose our spiritual sense and our mental sense. And I'm gonna talk about my own experiences with this. So right now I am probably the leanest I've ever been in my life, and the fittest I've ever been in my life. And that wasn't always the case. On my wedding day, I was actually a good 50-60 pounds heavier, and it was not because I put on a bunch of muscle mass. It was because I put on a bunch of weight. And what that experience taught me was so many things, because I had always been in relatively good shape throughout my entire life up until that point. And another thing also is that I have been mostly self-employed up until that point. And what I noticed as I started to gain weight is that people started treating me differently. Even clients who had been with me for a very long time started to treat me differently, started to look at me differently, treat me differently. And it's interesting because when you lose the weight and you get back into shape, well, guess what? People start to treat you nice again. It's kind of it's a horrible thing to say, but it's just one of the realities that we live in. It's just one of the things that we deal with as people. And I asked myself, okay, was it me as a person that allowed that I should say, opened up this avenue of treatment, or was it my physical appearance that opened up this avenue of treatment? And if I'm being completely honest with myself, I would say it's a little bit of both, because the factors that led to me putting on those 50-60 pounds, it was a lot of mental factors. It was a lot of, let's say, I wouldn't say necessarily unresolved issues, but it was definitely a lot of my shadow aspect coming out. I was partying a bit too hard, drinking a bit too much, eating, fancy meals every single night, all that kind of stuff. So not only did it burn a hole in my pocketbook, but it also put a lot of weight on my belly too. And so, a lot of my clients that I had worked with, they were all healthy people. They were all people who took really good care of themselves. I used to, and these clients were students. I used to teach in some of the wealthiest neighborhoods in San Diego. And so, when you're working with the ultra wealthy, a lot of them, they prioritize their health above everything else, because what good is all that money if you're going to let yourself go? What good is all that money if you can't enjoy yourself, if you can't, get off the couch with ease, if you can't walk to your car or walk up a flight of stairs? And again, if I let myself go in that sense, what was the energy that I was projecting? So yes, the body is such an integral part to our experience. And I know that we are all children of God. I know that we are all equal in the sense that we all have a soul and all of these wonderful things, but also at the same time, our bodies are essentially our billboards to the outside world. And if you are in a position to be able to take care of yourself, to be able to take care of your body, it's very important that we should. So unless you're confined to a wheelchair like Stephen Hawking, or you've got some obscure let's say congenital heart condition that keeps you from exercising or working out, it's very important to at least take care of the body and give it its certain respect. I'm not saying guys have to get down to 10% body fat, or women have to get down to 20% body fat, or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, are we taking care of ourselves? And also, of course, some people would say, well, this is the only life we have, why not live it up? And I get that too. I used to have more of that attitude when I was in my 20s, and I think as we get older, not everyone, but as we get older, a lot of times, we start to really become confronted with our own mortality. And so you have to ask yourself, okay, well, am I going to start to play the longevity game to add not only just years to my life, but to also add quality years to my life by getting in shape? Or am I going to just say, forget it, and still eat the food that's bad for me, still drink like a fish, still consume copious amounts of sugar and sodium and all these things, and have all these health problems? We all have free will. We all have our own lives to live. For me personally, I would say there are many experiences, spiritual experiences, that I had because I was fit and active. Let's say, for example, going skiing. I'm an avid skier, and to be able to to barrel down the mountain at like 60 miles an hour, there's something kind of liberating in that. There is a spiritual experience in that. When you're going that fast on skis, when you're going down moguls, and you feel like you're at one with the mountain, and even just being in the mountains, being amongst the trees, being amongst the skies and the snow in that scenario is in and of itself a very spiritual experience too. And had if I was in the shape to where I couldn't physically do that, well, those experiences would be cut off from me. I just wouldn't be there in the first place. So, it's, again, for me personally, getting in shape and getting the body to a point to where it doesn't hold me back is very important. And again, I would recommend it to anyone. And also, it's more than just about looks or any of that kind of stuff. When it comes to, let's say, self-employment especially, it gets you more clients, it gets you more business, you're able to make more money. And also, when you're also really mindful about your health too, you're putting good things into your body. You're not putting junk food into your body. And so when you have those nutrients, when you have the proper nutrition, your mind thinks better too. And guess what? Ultimately, your connection to spirit improves too, because there's no gunk in the interface. You see, you're cleaning out your neural connections. You're cleaning out the toxins in your body. You're cleaning out all that gunk that just kind of builds up and slows us down over time. And again, like I said, for this year, I started to really become mindful of my health. I actually started eating very well. I got rid of packaged foods, I cut out sugar. I drink my coffee black now. So yeah, I'm eating great. And I've noticed it's completely, again, changed my mental awareness, and it's also connected me to spirit. I will personally attest to that taking care of our bodies also takes care of the mind and the spirit as well. So again, if you're in the position to where you can do that, then yeah, by all means do it. Healing the body is one of the best and probably the easiest way to heal yourself. So many times in spirituality, we're looking. Well, I should let me take it a step back. How many times in spirituality do we hear, spiritualists become synonymous with healers? Well, what is there to really heal from? If you can heal your body, you've already healed a third of what ails you. And if you can heal your body, well, guess what? You can heal a lot of what's happening in spirit. Again, because that interface is cleaned up, that gunk is cleaned up. You can even heal your mind, because you're not getting depressed over, you're not getting depressed over probably, what we're seeing in the mirror or any of that kind of stuff. In fact, as you start to get in shape, it's like, all right, cool. This is good. Like, I'm taking care of myself. I'm looking better. And it does something. It boosts the confidence. It has nothing to do with attention or anything like that. It just has everything to do with feeling good from the inside. And when we feel good from the inside, when our cells have the nutrients that they need, when we are exercising and we're building that muscle mass, a lot of those aches and pains go away. A lot of the discomfort, especially as you get older, a lot of those things begin to go away too. So yes, very important to balance out the mind, body, and spirit. And if you've resonated with today's message, then feel free to leave a like, subscribe, or comment, and let us all know how you've resonated with today's message. If you're interested in carrying the conversation further, then take a look at my Discord. And also, I'm hosting a variety of private services on that Discord as well. Now, I've gotten rid of a lot of the energy work. I'm not going to be doing individual energy work on people anymore right now. And I also won't be doing group meditations anymore. I decided to be more of a spiritual coach. So I will lead you in the directions that you want. I will suggest literature or suggest certain things, but I will not do individual energy work. The reason being, especially after the last couple of videos I made, is I want to take out everything which could turn what I'm doing more negative. You see, I want to take out everything which could turn things kind of culty. And when I first decided to make these channels, it was really about helping people out. And if there is one thing that I discovered in all of the spiritual explorations that I've done with other people and in group work and all this kind of stuff, is that it's very easy to take these one-on-one sessions, and it's very easy to take these group sessions and to get to a point where, you know, people can be manipulated. I'm not saying that I manipulate people or anything like that, but if every sort of group activity kind of goes down that path, well, why would I want to create another group activity type of thing and say, oh, well, you know, that's not me. I would just rather avoid the whole thing. Anyways, so yeah, I can coach you spiritually. Like I said, I can help guide your path, but everyone has to do their own energy work for themselves. Okay, so thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it, and now we shall close with the chant of Oblyron, love and light and wisdom and shadow. Amde sote, amde Oblyron, amde sote, amde Oblyron.